Ritika Dhyani. I work as an assistant professor in Ajay Garg Engineering College. So in today's video lecture, we will be discussing on the topic transaction, that is the subtopic in subject database management system. First of all, what is a transaction? It is any logical work or set of works that are done on the data of a database is known as a particular transaction. For example, in case you want to transfer some money from one account to another, in that case, that is also one of the transaction. Logical work can be inserting a new value in the current database, deleting existing value, or updating the current value in the database. It can be any of it. For example, adding a new member to the database of a team is also a transaction. So, transaction can be any logical work. To complete a transaction, we have to follow some steps which make a transaction successful. For example, we want to withdraw the cash from ATM. It is an example of transaction and it can be done in the following steps. So, what are the basic steps that will be there when we want to transfer money from one account to another? Is firstly initialization. If transaction is there, then some kind of initialization would be there. Inserting the ATM card into the machine, that will be your second step. Once you enter the ATM machine room, then you firstly enter your credit card, ATM card. Choosing the language is the third step that you have done. Choosing the account type, the machine asks you whether it is a current account or a saving account or another type of account. Entering the cash amount, then your screen will move on to the next screen, which will be asking what amount you want to withdraw. Then after entering the amount, you have your PIN that you need to enter in the machine. Then collecting the cash, because you want to withdraw it, then there will be cash. And lastly, aborting the transaction, and you press the cancel or exit button, right? So these are the basic steps that is there when you done any transaction physically, right? In database, we have 3 steps for transaction, which are the following. First one is, first you need to read the data value. Second, you do some updation or you enter some new values, anything like that. And at last, when you are done, you commit that transaction. It means whatever updations you have done in the database are now successfully stored in the database. It is permanently stored now. We can update the above 3 states by an example. For example, let's suppose we have 2 accounts, account 1 and account 2. In this case, let's have, for example, you are having this one account and there is account 2 with an initial amount 1000 each. In both the accounts, you have 1000 rupees. If we want to transfer 500 from this, we need to transfer 500 rupees from this account to this account, then we will commit the transaction. If we successfully have done that, then at last we will commit. All the account details are in secondary memory first of all, so they will be brought into the primary memory for any processing. Now we will read the data. Firstly, data is read, right? So this will read the data. For example, this is some value x, so it will read the value x. That this shows that the value of x is 1000. And now account 1 contains 500 rupees. When we have done that, then we do what we do, write x minus 500. So this will, what we'll do is, it will deduct 500 rupees from this account. So now account 1 will be having 500 rupees left. And then you commit this transaction. Now we will read the data from account 2. Then, for example, this is a y variable. You read it will be having 1000 rupees. Now another write operation, what will it do? It will add 500 rupees to this account. And now what happens is, commit operation is done at last. Now this account Y will have 1500 rupees and this will have 500 rupees. So this is how transfer of money is done using all these steps: read, write and commit operation. Just remember, when you write the commit operation, it means your transaction is successful and your updation, your manipulation of data is successfully stored on the database. In the end, we will use the commit command, which indicates that the transaction has been successful and we can store the changes in secondary memory. If in any case there is a failure, because in case of network issue or anything like that, system crash or hardware issue, before the commit command, then the system will be back into its previous state. Means account 1 and account 2 both will have 1000 rupees and no transaction will be there in this case, and no changes will be there. Now, when we talk about the failure, there are different types of failure. First one is transaction failure, second is system crash, third is disk failure. What is a transaction failure? A transaction failure occurs when it fails to execute or when it reaches a point from where it can't go any further. If a few transaction or process is hurt, then it is called transaction failure. Reasons for transaction failure could be any reason, like logical or syntax. Both can be the cause of a transaction failure. First one is logical error. If a transaction cannot complete due to some code error or any internal error condition, then it is a logical error occurrence. Next, if you have write the syntax inappropriate, then also it is a syntax error. It occurs when the DBMS itself terminates an active transaction because the database system is not able to execute it. For example, the system aborts an active transaction in case of deadlock or resource unavailability. Let's say we need to transfer money from one account to another, right? And for example, there are some other transactions which are doing some transferring job. Then a deadlock condition might occur if the first transaction is requiring an X resource and the second transaction is using X, then how first will acquire the X? So in that case, a deadlock will occur because both of the transaction will be waiting for some resources that is unavailable for that particular time. So in that case, the system itself will not allow the transaction to be completed, and it just shut down the transaction and it comes in the syntax error failure. System failure can occur due to power failure. It can also be a cause, or other hardware or software failure. For example, operating system error. Fail stop assumption. In the system crash, non-volatile storage is assumed not to be corrupted. This is the cause of the system crash. Next is disk failure, third one. It occurs where hard disk drives or storage drives used to fail frequently. It was a common problem in the early days of the technology evolution. Disk failure occurs due to the formation of bad sectors in the disk head crash, and unreachability to a particular sector of a disk, or any other failure which destroy all or part of the disk storage. In that case also, the transaction will not be able to retrieve the information from the disk, and it will occur as disk failure, and it shows this particular call. Now, once there is a failure, then we need to recover our data. For that, we have log-based recovery, right? The log is a sequence of records. Log of each transaction is maintained in some stable storage so that if any failure occurs, then it can be recovered from there. if any operation is performed on the database, then it will be recorded in the log. But the process of storing the logs should be done before the actual transaction is applied in the database. It means before the actual commit is there, all the logs must be saved. When the transaction is initiated, then it writes start log. So this is how firstly log start log, which T1 transaction is start. This is how a transaction is recorded on log, right? When the transaction modifies the city from Noida to Bangalore, then another log is written. When this transaction is updating some value, so this is how it will write that T1 transaction, what it have done in the column city, it changes the data from Noida to Bangalore. This is the previous value and this is the current value after updation. So this is how another log is created. At last, when the transaction is finished, then it writes another log for the commit. It writes T1 transaction is now committed. So in particular log, when all of these are done, before the transaction is actually applied on the database, all these must be saved, and after this is saved, the transaction commit operation is performed on the database and the data is successfully updated, right? So in case of any failure, if for example this particular transaction have failed in between, right, means after this system crash will be there, then what will happen, the system will check its log. In the log, it finds that there is a start of the log, then some updation is done, which is done by T1 transaction in this particular column from this previous value to this current value, and there is a commit also. So what the system will do, it will redo the transaction in the database and the recovery is done. So there are two approaches to modify any data in the database. First one is deferred database modification. In this modification, it occurs if the transaction does not modify the database until it has committed. It means when all the updations are done, until the commit operation, the data is not modified in the database. In this method, all the logs are created and stored in the stable storage, and the database is updated when the transaction performs its commit operation. Second one is immediate database modification. As the name itself suggests that this is one of the immediate operation that has been done on the database. It occurs if database modification occur when the transaction is still active. It means as the transaction move forward, the updations or modifications are parallelly done in the database. In this technique, the database is modified immediately after every operation. It follows an actual database modification. Now, second is recovery using log records. When the system is crashed, then the system consults the log to find which transaction needs to be undone. If there is no commit statement in the log, then the transaction is undone. If the system finds the commit statement in the log record, then that particular transaction needs to be redone. If the log contains the record like start and commit or alone commit itself, then the transaction TI needs to be redone. If the log file contains start but there is no commit statement in that particular file, then that transaction needs to be undone. Next one is recovery using checkpoints. The checkpoint is a type of mechanism where all the previous logs are removed from the system and permanently stored in the storage disk. The checkpoint is like a bookmark. While the execution of the transaction, such checkpoints are marked and the transaction is executed. Then using the steps of the transaction, the log files will be created. What happens is, in real life, when we play games, then there is a stage when a checkpoint is there, and when you cross that particular stage, all your previous modifications or your previous game strategies are stored in the database. And when you, for example, shut down the game and again restart it, it will start from that particular checkpoint only, because all the previous data is saved there. That is how checkpoint in database management system works. When it reaches to the checkpoint, then the transaction will be updated into the database, and till that point, the entire log file will be removed from the file. Then the log file is updated with the new steps of transaction till next checkpoint, and so on. For example, the checkpoint is used to declare a point before which the database was in the consistent state and all the transactions were committed. Let's check this particular figure in which there are 4 transactions, and this is the start of the transaction and commit. So when this particular transaction is running, a checkpoint was there and all the data is saved before this checkpoint, right? And then T2 transactions happen, T3 transaction happen. At this particular time, the failure occur due to some transaction failure or some system crash or disk failure. Any type of failure can occur at this particular time. Then what will happen to these 4 transactions? The recovery system reads log files from the end to start. It reads log from T4. It firstly starts reading the log file of T4 transaction till T1. Recovery system maintains 2 lists, a redo list and undo list. So there will be redo list and undo list. If the system sees a log with start and commit or just commit, in the redo list, there are and their previous list, all the transactions are removed and then redone before saving the logs. In this particular example, transaction T2 and T3 will have start and commit, right? And the T1's transaction will have only commit in the log file. That's why the transaction is committed after checkpoint is crossed. Hence, it puts T1, T2, T3. All these transactions T1, T2 and T3, because its commit is there, its commit and T1's commit is also there. What will it do? It will redo the modifications done by these transactions. But for 4th transaction, it is having the start, but there is no commit, because before committing, already system failure occur at this particular time. So this T4 transaction log file will have T4 start, some modification, and there is no commit statement. So what it will do? Any modification done by this particular transaction will be undone. So undo will happen in case of T4. Next is deadlock in DBMS. A deadlock is a condition where 2 or more transactions are waiting indefinitely for one another to give up locks. Deadlock is said to be one of the most feared complications in DBMS, as no task ever gets finished and in waiting forever. What happens is, for example, in student table, transaction T1 holds some lock on some rows. One of the transaction is having doing some modification from row 3 to row 5, right? Simultaneously, transaction T2 holds lock on some rows in that particular table and needs to update the rows in the student table held by, and there is another transaction which is working on row 6 to row 8. But in between, this transaction wants to update value of these row, and this transaction wants to update values of these row. then both of these will get stuck at this particular time and no transaction will ever get executed. So this is when this cycle appears in the database, then it is a clear condition of deadlock. Now the main problem arises. T1 is waiting for T2 to release its lock, and similarly T2 is waiting for T1 to release its lock. All activities come to a halt state and remains at the standstill. It will remain in this particular state until DBMS detects the deadlock and aborts both of these transactions based on some condition. Next is deadlock avoidance. When a database is stuck in a deadlock state, then it is better to avoid the database rather than aborting any of the transaction. This is a waste of time and resource, because if T1 and T2 gets aborted in between and all the modifications are again undone by these two transactions, then all the resources that they have been using from start till the abortion will get wasted. Deadlock avoidance mechanism is used to detect any deadlock situation in advance. A method like wait for graph is used for detecting the deadlock situation, but this method is suitable only for smaller databases. For the large databases, deadlock prevention method can be used. Now, what we need to do is we need to detect the deadlock in a database, for which I have already told you that if there exists any cycle in the database, then it is a clear condition of deadlock. When a transaction waits indefinitely to obtain a lock, then database should detect whether the transaction is involved in a deadlock or not. The lock manager maintains a wait for graph and detect the cycle in the database. Wait for graph it is a suitable method for deadlock detection. In this method, a graph is maintained or created based on the transaction and its logs. If the created graph has a cycle or a closed loop, there is a deadlock. This graph is maintained by the system for every transaction which is waiting for some data held by the other. The system keeps checking the graph if there is any cycle is there. Thank you.